Hello and welcome to another video on my channel, The Money Passport, where I'm sharing my journey as a digital nomad entrepreneur seeking financial freedom. I started this journey last summer, so it's been over a year now, time to reflect and make up the balance. So in this video, I'm sharing the 12 things I learned in my first year as a digital nomad. But let me first admit that this entire journey didn't really start the way I once dreamed about it. I've worked and saved money for many years, and I've always had this dream of maybe once quitting my job and going on a world trip. And I thought maybe if I go to cheaper countries and live a backpacker lifestyle, I could make it last as long as possible without giving up all of my savings. And maybe along the way I would meet interesting people, other nomads, get inspired, and maybe after traveling for a while, maybe I get tired of moving too quickly. And I thought maybe at some point I will slow down, stay at one place, have this brilliant business idea and start my own business. Maybe set myself some deadline to see if it works or not. And then the outcome would be either I succeed and happy days, I can continue this lifestyle. Or on the other hand, if it doesn't work, I would see myself go back home, apply for another job and continue my corporate life. Now, especially this last scenario never really appealed to me because I was afraid that maybe I wasn't successful, I'd spent all my money on my travels, and of course none of this would bring me closer to financial freedom. And another thing I wasn't completely sure of is whether I would be comfortable to travel on a shoestring budget, going from hostel to hostel, living a cheap lifestyle, as I know I'm not 20 anymore. So in the end I kept postponing this for a few years while still saving more and more money, investing. But in the meantime I did a lot of research as well, trying to find what my own passions are and also look at what other people do who are successful. And in the meantime, I also developed a couple of ideas that I already started working on. Then I was very close to making the decision, COVID hit, so I again had to postpone it for a little bit, save more money. So I ended up making the decision last year. Last year, COVID was still a very uncertain factor, making planning and especially traveling very complicated. But I felt confident enough and I really wanted to do this. Luckily, I also landed a part-time freelance gig, which doesn't pay nowhere near what I earned in my corporate job. But since it's only part-time and it does pay my bills, I also have lots of other time available to work on my own ideas. So instead of going on a world trip, instead I started my life as a digital nomad straight away. Now of course this lifestyle is more expensive than that shoestring budget that I had in my mind. I'm living in more comfortable places, I rent entire apartments as I'm just busy and I need a little bit more comfort. But luckily I did not have to use any of my savings yet because the income I have covers my lifestyle at the moment. But this brings me straight to the first lesson I learned in my first year, which is that the nomadic lifestyle is much cheaper than I actually thought. So first of all, the nomadic lifestyle differs from typical vacations in the fact that you travel slower. For example, your accommodation is more expensive when you book one or only a few nights in one place. Compared to like the discounts you can get even when you book through a booking platform, you still get like discounts when you book for a week or a month. And especially when you rent an apartment, you can cook yourself so you don't need to eat out all the time, which also is a big cost saving compared to a typical holiday. As a nomad, you're also less tied to specific holidays or peak seasons. You can actually avoid all that. Like I avoided the Mediterranean this summer and decided to travel around Romania, Serbia, and right now I'm in Albania. Then you can also save money on being flexible on the specific days and times you travel, or even with hotels that might be cheaper during the week than in the weekend. Sometimes vice versa, it depends on the location. Flights usually are cheaper on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you know, when you don't have to be back home on Sunday night to start working on Monday morning again, it saves you tons of money. Now then, of course, there's also the geographic arbitrage. You can earn your money in one country, but this doesn't have to be dependent on the cost of living because you can spend your money in a country where that monetary value is worth more than in the country you earn your money. So for example, the income from my freelance gig is dependent on the market in the Netherlands, my background, my language skills, etc. But the money I spend is dependent on the price levels in the countries I travel to. And of course, in the last year, I've noticed a big difference in price levels in Eastern Europe compared to the West. And this counts for almost anything: accommodation, public transport, groceries, eating and drinking out. So it adds up to a lot. And then the last cost saver is something I started to realize throughout this year, which is that other than the cost of living in the location you are, maybe you have some medical insurance or business operational cost, but apart from that, you don't have any other cost like you normally have. I'm not paying any rent or a mortgage or any other bills in my home country. And this is of course the biggest difference compared to being on a normal holiday. The second learning is that I've never had more time, flexibility and control over my entire life. And this is both professionally and personally. Work-wise, I can 100% focus on my own priorities and I can work when and where I want and feel most productive. But also when it comes to personal and professional development, I feel so much more freedom in choosing what I want to learn and what I want to spend my time on. When I was still working in corporate jobs, of course I focused most of my time on the things I was being paid for. But when it comes to development, it's also so easy to get caught up within that corporate framework. You're working in a specific company, maybe a specific department, and you're working in a specific industry. So it narrows your framework of your career development very much. And it's so easy to then think about what are the logical next steps in my career. Do I want to grow and become like a manager, managing people? Do I want to develop other skills? But in the end, it's always a compromise between what your company offers and what you want yourself. But right now, I can do anything I want. If I want to become better at making these videos, I can do it. If I want to learn about the financial markets because it's my interest and I think I want to create more content around that and I think that's something I want to develop in further, I can do it. While when I was working in corporate jobs, I spent so much time on learning things about tools, about industries, about products that maybe I will never use again in the future. So that was a bit learning, and the flexibility of learning what you want is so important, I think. Outside of work, I also have more control over my time, simply because friends and family that normally claim my time are not around. Of course, when traveling solo, loneliness can kick in at times as well, and not having your friends and family close to you, around you, when you want, is definitely a downside of this lifestyle. But at the same time, I've also experienced the positive side of this. It's so easy to get caught up with everything that's happening around you in your life. Maybe you have a challenging and busy job that maybe requires overtime. Maybe your employer or team invites you for team building drinks or dinners every now and then. Maybe you're part of a sports team or other community that requires your attendance and time. Maybe you have a big family or even an in-law family as well, with all things going on like birthdays, newborn babies, maybe entire family weekends or other occasions and celebrations. Maybe there's a yearly street barbecue, all these kind of small things that add up and can completely fill up your calendar weeks ahead. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not judging that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, especially when you like all these events and it gives you a lot of energy. But the reality is many people also feel that they always need to attend everything and it's hard to say no, and that means that you have less time or maybe no time at all for yourself left. My experience is that when you get out of your normal environment, it's like a blank piece of paper that you can then start filling in again by yourself. And this then also includes meeting new people, opening yourselves up to new cultures, and maybe you meet interesting people and also the people that can actually help you move forward in life. And let's be honest, that's not gonna happen with that friend that always keeps complaining about his job but is never willing to take any action. While as a nomad, it's easier to decide when and with who you want to hang out. Another learning was that since I started on my own, I really had to start appreciating my own work and efforts, because especially in the beginning, at many times I felt guilty whenever I wasn't fully productive or I first had to spend time learning something new. But when I then look back at the tasks I had actually completed during that day or week, I realized I was being too hard on myself because I had actually done more than I would have in my previous office life. Back in the days when I was working in corporate jobs, I first of all had to commute to work, and I was always being disturbed by colleagues, by phone calls, by chats. My weeks were always filled with useless meetings and activities that were not part of the core of my job, like mandatory administration and reporting, one-on-ones, team meetings, regional meetings, all hands calls. I got tons of corporate email newsletters and updates, CC'd emails, tons of training that was not all relevant. I've always worked for big American companies, and every now and then they would always come up with these like mandatory trainings like code of conduct, security, sexual harassment, anti-bribery, or trainings about projects or products that were only partly relevant for me. And all this actually makes me realize how inefficient my previous office life was. And I really appreciate that I can now completely focus on my own priorities, and that makes me so much more productive. Then a thing that I already knew but now actually experience is that traveling is unequal to working, and you can't combine the two. Okay, this is a bold one and it's not entirely true. I've been working from airport lounges, trains, buses, hotels, cafes, and I've had even some of the most productive days while commuting. But let's be honest, that's exceptional and it's not sustainable on the long term. In general, working slows down your travels and it limits the other things that you can do on a day, and traveling at a faster pace slows down productivity. I've brought this to the test this summer as I've spent a full month traveling around Romania, so check out those videos if you're interested in the details. My conclusion was that I was most productive in the places where I stayed the longest, which was a week. I could have easily seen those cities in 2 or 3 days, but I decided to spread this out over a week so I can actually accommodate some work hours in between. I also really learned and embraced the value of staying somewhere for longer, for a deeper connection with the location, the people and their culture, which is a different experience because you're not a local but not a regular tourist either. And this makes it also easier to make friends with people at a deeper level, including with the locals. You also get to see more than the regular touristic highlights, and you also probably wander the same streets multiple times, and every time you see something new again as well. You also have the opportunity to benefit from the different weather conditions, like working when it rains and get out with the sun when you want to, or simply go back to that beautiful place once again for that sunset view. When you're on holiday, you probably want to see as much as possible before you go, because you never know if you're ever gonna come back. But I've really learned to let go of that fear of missing out. This is because I know that I'm not on holiday full time, and if I work hard enough, I can sustain this lifestyle, so there will always be a next place to go to. And I don't have to go back to the office like the vacationers do. Another thing is that I never had a steeper learning curve, as I learned so many new things that I can't even recall everything. First of all, I learned, and I'm still learning, many practical things regarding traveling and the nomadic lifestyle. I also learned a lot about the countries I stayed in and their cultures and history. But I also learned so many new skills and gained so much more knowledge since I started working for myself. Like building a website, things around search engine optimization, how the YouTube algorithm works, other social media platforms. I used to learn with new tools like photo and video editing software, Canva to make presentations and these YouTube thumbnails. And this is all great because this is where my passion is, and this is where I want to continue to develop myself. I also had to get used to not having my regular paychecks, having a much lower income and no job security. So I had to stop spending like I normally did or how I would on a typical holiday. This means trying to avoid taxis when there are good public transport alternatives, being reasonable with eating and drinking out, and not always opt for that expensive tour, excursion or rental car. Of course, this all depends on your income and budget, but as a nomad you can't keep on pampering yourself like you're on holiday all year long. And remember, I'm destined to become financially independent, so anything reasonable I can save on will get me there faster. I also found it particularly hard and time-consuming to find cheap accommodations, and so far I ended up booking through the regular booking platforms most of the time. Every location has its own standards, its own price levels, its own real estate agents, its own Facebook expat or nomad communities. So this searching, contacting and communicating at every new location can be so time-consuming and doesn't always lead to better deals or the accommodation that you're looking for. Many nomads also use the strategy to first book for a few days somewhere. When you get to the location, then start searching locally, walk around and see those signs and contact the people, and then negotiate the best deal for a long-term rental. But the shorter you're planning to stay, the less sense this makes, and it's also particularly harder in a big city, as you can't walk around the entire city to find and compare apartments. But I'm sure I'll get better at this over time, and so far in Albania, every time I came back, I've managed to get a better apartment deal simply because I know people and I've made many friends here. Apart from the apartment search itself, there are also always these small challenges to overcome wherever you are. First of all, you have to find your way in every new place. finding out the public transport options, the currency, get used to the exchange rates, and find the best supermarket for your daily groceries. Here's also an extra challenge when traveling faster, as you constantly need to decide what's worth buying or not for the time that you're going to be there. Or do you still have room to take any of that stuff with you to the next place? Things like detergent, soap, tin foil, spices, cleaning solutions, for example. There can also be a challenge of getting your appliances to work, like this washing machine with only Greek signs on it. Or reading the ingredients or cooking instructions on a food container can also be another challenge. The language can be a barrier too when talking to the local people, but learning even a few words of the local language can break the ice, and the smiles you get in return are simply priceless. The culture and habits can also be hard to understand at first. Like here in Albania, for example, people are not programmed to live by the clock like I am, for example. So opening hours are not always very strict, and some businesses even can say that they're always open, which seems strange and very hard to believe. But it makes a lot more sense when you learn that most of these small businesses are family run and they want to serve every customer. So a bar might stay open as long as there are clients, but close early when there's no one. I can continue this list of challenges, but my point is that there will always be these small challenges, and it's simply part of the experience, and it has its charm, so better embrace it. And you will learn that in the end you will always overcome these small inconveniences. Another thing I learned is that it's much harder to live a healthy lifestyle when you're moving around. Traveling simply breaks your routines, and it's much harder to get back into your routines in an unfamiliar place with lots of distractions. It's simply harder to find healthy food, the right ingredients, or a workout space in a place you're unfamiliar with. So it's easy and tempting to skip on exercising, eat out, or buy junk food, especially when you associate traveling with a normal holiday in which you're used to cheat on your healthy habits. I have to admit that this simply wasn't a priority for me, as I had so many other things on my head already. But it's definitely something I want to improve on going forward. Now, even with all the changes and challenges I have mentioned so far, I haven't experienced becoming a digital nomad as a big step, but rather as a smooth, continuous process. Maybe this had to do with the fact that I had already lived abroad for many years, have traveled a lot in my life, and was well prepared. But I also believe that many people look at it in fear of the unknown, while in reality it's not as big of a step as it might seem, and in the end you'll always figure it out if you have the right mindset and determination. Then the last thing I learned is maybe the most important lesson from this first year as a nomad, which is that I've never been happier. It simply doesn't feel like working when I'm doing the things I like. I'm able to travel much more than ever, and I'm really enjoying the freedom and control over my own life. So that's it. If you have any questions or remarks, comment down below. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe. And then I'll see you in my next video. Bye!